see you guys in the dark.
This situation has made my anxiety disorder much, much worse, and I feel the need to share it somewhere. In late January this year, I'm 15 and female, was committed to an adolescent mental hospital for a suicide attempt. Something that was stupid on my part, but not crucial to the story, just background information as to why I'm there. This was the first time that I was ever sent to a facility, and having a severe anxiety disorder, I was scared out of my mind. Cue the first run-in with Arthur. I won't speak too much on his physical appearance, but he was 17 and male. Looked like the classic school shooter kind of kid. Heavy boots, all black clothing, long hair. No judgment, I was fairly edgy when I was younger. On my first day there, I noticed right away that he would be staring at me all the time. The first thing he said to me was, "I like your boots." I was wearing Doc Martens at the time, which was pretty normal. I appreciated the compliment, so I opted to start talking to him. A big mistake on my part. He started off simply by talking about books and music, of which we had similar tastes in. But then Arthur started sitting next to me at every group meeting, every meal, everything. More like following me would be a better phrase. His words started getting more concerning as time went on. I saw a number of red flags, but it's not like I could do anything about it. We were being held in a hospital. I couldn't just up and leave. I have exact quotes from him because I kept a journal at my time of the hospital. Here are some. "You seem like you have no corruption. You're an outlier. Everyone here is a degenerate. You know that there are sociopaths here, right?" Hinting at himself. But this is just the beginning. Things didn't really heat up until he started giving me poems. Poems like eerie, biblical, religious references that he would slide under the door of my room. I don't have any of my original poems. The hospital had confiscated them. So I'm going to try to summarize based on my journal entries. There was, of course, the poem where he said I was the Virgin Mary, which, though I find incredibly funny now, was scary at the time. In the poems, he would romanticize to me in an angelic way, and contrasted himself as a demon. The last poem he gave me was concerning. He seemed to be counting down the days until something. He referred to some Catholic day of reckoning that for the life of me I can't remember. I'm not a member of that religion, by the way, but it was clear that this day of reckoning involved me. I finally reported this to one of the staff members. They moved me into a different unit. I later found out, after my discharge, that Arthur was schizophrenic. I'm glad that I said something when I did, because that probably would have ended badly for me. So this took place about 2 years ago. A bit of an introduction to me. I've been having some health issues the past few years. Around the beginning of my health getting bad, I went to the hospital for the first time. Earlier that day, I was sitting in a lecture trying to focus on the content. I started having a nasty headache. My vision began to fade. I started getting nervous about it because it got to the point where I couldn't see anything anymore, and I started getting nauseous. Now, I later found out that it was a really bad migraine, but I had never had one before, and my family didn't have a history of migraines, so I was really worried about losing my vision. After my sight came back, I was messaging one of my friends, telling her about my concerns. She told me that she would drive me to the hospital if I needed a ride. I was extremely grateful to her. Since it was around midterms, and we were both really busy, I took her up on that offer, and we ended up going to the hospital after my lecture was over. We went inside the hospital, and I was triaged. Now, for those of you not familiar with the Canadian healthcare system, we often have really long waiting times. I figured we would be there for a little while, so we decided to hunker down in a set of chairs a bit away from the main waiting area, as there were none available in the waiting area. A few hours had passed, and we were just chilling on our phones and talking. This nurse wheels out a man in a wheelchair, covered with a blanket, and sits him on the wall opposite of us. I briefly look up to see him staring at us, but I didn't really pay any mind. Eventually, he strikes up a conversation asking about us. Again, no red flags, so we make friendly conversation. The conversation fades, and he rolls away. He comes back and starts staring at us again. I start to get uncomfortable and I text my friend. I look over at him. This dude has his hand under his blanket, and there was a jerking motion. I also noticed that part of his leg wasn't covered in the blanket, and his pants were slightly lowered. He starts to make grunting noises. I freeze. I want to laugh because I'm so uncomfortable. I text my friend and tell her what's going on. She says to just ignore it. She also looks uncomfortable as well. A few emergency personnel walk by, but don't really notice. I'm too scared to say anything to them, because what if he is actually just injured and is trying to shield wherever he is injured? So eventually there is a louder groan, and he goes quiet. He continues to stare at us for a good 30 minutes or so before the nurses come and bring him to another room. This was by far the most uncomfortable hospital experience that I've ever had. So back in November of 2020, I was in and out of the hospital with testicular torsion 8 times altogether. Why permanently fix a medical issue when you can temporarily fix it, I guess? And on my last time at one of the hospitals, I had called the taxi to go home, but it would take about 30 to 45 minutes to get to me because it was a Saturday in the city. Since there was going to be a bit of a wait, I decided to sit down in a bench garden area just in front of the hospital. It was 3 a.m., about 0 degrees Celsius, and I had been awake for 36 hours at that point. My taxi was on its way, and I just sat cross-legged on the bench, headphones on, and nicotine keeping me alive. Everything was all fine until about 10 minutes after. I noticed a guy very clearly walking directly towards me. He was stumbling a little bit, so I just assumed that he was drunk. As he got on level with me, he stepped right in front of me, and then said something that I didn't hear. I looked up and said, "What? I'm sorry, I had my music on," as I pulled them off. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I could fucking batter you right now." Of everything I was expecting him to say, that wasn't on the list. So caught off guard, I tried just disarming him with humor by saying, "I don't doubt it," which did work, thank God, because he would have absolutely pummeled me into the ground. And every time I said that, or something similar, he'd just say that I would batter you. I want to deck you right here, right now. And I could take you in a fight, just to recall a few of them. After his anger had toned down, he sat on the bench next to me, started genuinely drunk rambling about his family, his friends, and very specifically, his best friend's girlfriend that he was having an affair with. Then he pointed out my shoes, saying that those are nice. Can I have them? Obviously, I said no firmly, but aggressively. Then said thanks and told him about the fact that I got them on sale. He said, "Can I touch them?" which was immediately a big red flag. I politely declined. He started rubbing my shoe anyways. I was still sitting cross-legged on the bench. Then in one swift movement, he grabbed my ankle, pulled my entire leg up to his face, put the entire shoe of my size 11 Converse in his mouth, at which point, while sitting, I was stunned silent. I started desperately looking around. I see the hospital police walking over. The police asks if we are here together. He said yes. I said no. The officer then asks if he was a patient. I said yes. He said no. I told the officer that I was just waiting for my taxi, and the guy rambled something I couldn't really make out to the officer, who suggested he just move along. The guy stood up, gave me a handshake, and walked off into the night. The officer obviously asked if I was okay, and I told him what happened. He was just as confused as I was. After that, my taxi was due in 5 minutes. So I went and stood on the opposite side of the hospital where the taxi rank was. I had asked some friends who were familiar with a lot of drugs what he could have been on, and they unanimously told me that it was meth, and the shoe thing was probably just a fetish of his. I'm definitely glad that the cops showed up when he did. I really don't know what could have happened if they didn't. When I was 6 years old, I loved the fire, candles, because it fascinated me, which it still kind of does. Around the time of Halloween, where we carved pumpkins and mat lanterns out of it, I got a little bit too excited and couldn't wait for my mom to help me light the candle. So I sneaked away with one of the candles and dumb 6-year-old me thought, hey, I'll show them how much of a grown-up I am. I could light this candle myself. Or so I thought. For a reason I don't know anymore, I lit the candle up behind our couch and got a little bit too close. Then it happened. My shirt started to burn, and I ran into the kitchen where the rest of my family was. My brothers both started to scream, meanwhile my mother ripping my burning shirt off of my body. All while my stepdad played WoW. A few hours after this, I still wasn't in the hospital because my stepdad thought that it would be a great reason to start a fight over this. 2 weeks forward, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks now, and had multiple operations behind me, because apparently 3 plastic-like threads got burned into my skin, and needed to be removed. I had also 2 skin grafts, one time from my butt, which didn't work, and one successful from my thigh after this operation. I got introduced to my new roommate, a kid who was there for a reason that I didn't know. 3 weeks. I become friends pretty quickly with my new roommate. We played, watched TV, and did everything we could while being in a hospital. Our families tried to visit us as much as possible if work would allow it. Because my mom usually works overtime, she asked her boss if she could get off some days, which he thankfully agreed to. So on the 6th and last week of my hospital stay, my mom visited me every day. And on the last day, she also got to sleep the night in the hospital with me and my roommate. But in the last night, I noticed a shadow on my bed. I got scared and then screamed. My mom woke up immediately, turned on the light, and there he was. My roommate, in his hand, was a knife, which he somehow managed to hide from the nurses. According to my mom, he whispered the whole time that he doesn't want me to leave, and that he would make me his best friend if he wanted to. Turned out he was 14, had some kind of mental illness, and was there because he tried to kill himself. A few summers back, after I had just turned 18, a friend had invited me and some other friends to their family's second home in wine country. I was super excited and had agreed to meet my friend at a semi-distant subway. It was the Bart Bay Area Rapid Transport Station. Since it was only a weekend trip, I had all my stuff in a backpack, and my sleeping bag hooked up to the backpack. I'm pretty sure that because of that many people mistook me for a female vagrant, and thus more approachable, or maybe vulnerable. Indeed, that subway trip alone, I had more weird encounters than ever before. That same trip, I got hit on by a guy 3 times my age, and screamed by a homeless man who was asking for the time. However, by far the weirdest encounter that day, and probably in my life, was when the bearded woman in an open-backed hospital gown and hospital bracelet approached me. Now, I don't like to think of myself as discriminatory towards people with mental health issues, as most of my friends are depressed in some form or fashion. Yet when that woman in a hospital gown and plastic hospital bracelet approached me, my mind went straight to all those horror films about people escaping from an insane asylum, which turned out not to be too far from the truth. To give a bit of more detail on this woman, she was physically intimidating due to her very large and wide stature. She was at least 6 inches taller than me, and weighed a good 70 pounds more. And most memorable of all, she had a large amount of sparse, patchy, and wiry facial hair. When she started to approach me, I desperately looked down at my phone and tried to pretend that I was anywhere else but on that train platform, hoping that she wasn't actually headed for me. That, of course, did nothing, and she sat right next to me. She first asked me if she could borrow my phone. I really didn't want to let this person borrow my phone, as not only did I need to save the battery to rendezvous with my friends, but there had recently been a string of cell phone thefts on BART. I was not about to let mine get stolen, so I gave her some excuse about my battery, hoping that that would make her leave me alone. Unfortunately, my refusal was not a deterrent, as she took that as a cue to string up a conversation. She asked if I was traveling. Picking up on my large backpack and sleeping bag, I said yes, but was trying to be as vague as possible. Then she asked where I'm going, and as I did not know how to deflect her, and being too deeply uncomfortable to lie, I said the truth. Napa. She then proceeds to tell me how she had gotten locked up at a psychiatric facility in Napa after she had beat her husband with a phone receiver, after he had threatened her, feeling very glad that I did not give her my phone. I try to defuse the situation by sympathizing with her over my awful ex-husband. That prolongs the conversation. She asks me again to borrow my phone so that she could show me a website called World's Best Gore Vids. Apparently there is a particular video that she was a fan of that was a graphic video of a man getting his head run over by a tank. Now I don't know about you, but that is not something that I want to watch ever, but especially not with the woman who had just admitted to savagely beating someone. Luckily, soon after my train arrives at the station, and I board it. Unluckily, so did she. She kept talking to me during the ride. For my part, I try to say as little as possible to not seem rude and anger her, while also trying to make it clear that I am not interested in talking. She did not pick up on this cue, or did not care. We parted ways a few stops later, when she got off the train. She told me that she was meeting her new boyfriend there, and she had wanted to call him, which was why she had wanted to borrow my phone. I sincerely hope her new man does not have any phone receivers lying around.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.